This is the story of something truly strange and terrifying that happened during the lockdown. I am going to tell you everything exactly how it happened, and I promise, none of this is made up. It's all real. I lived through it, and even now, I can't forget those few nights. So during the 2020 lockdown, when everything was shut down and people stayed indoors, I moved into a small apartment just outside the city. It was quiet, isolated, and surrounded by trees. I thought it would be peaceful, the perfect place to stay away from the virus. I had just lost my job, and I didn't want to stay in the city anymore. Rent was cheap, and I thought I got lucky. But now I know why it was so cheap. The apartment was part of a small 2-story building. Only 4 apartments were in it, and when I moved in, only one other person lived there. Her name was Mrs. D'Souza, an old lady who lived directly above me. She barely came out and never talked much, just nodded when I saw her. The other 2 flats were empty. The first few days were fine. I would cook, read, watch movies, and video call friends. I liked the silence. But around the 4th night, something strange happened. It was about 2 in the morning. I was in bed scrolling through my phone when I heard footsteps upstairs. Not just footsteps, slow, dragging footsteps. I thought maybe the old lady couldn't sleep and was walking around. But then I remembered. She had told me earlier that she used a walker. These footsteps didn't sound like someone using a walker. They were clear, like someone pacing. I didn't think too much of it that night. But the next night, it happened again, around the same time. And then I heard something else. A thud, like something heavy dropped on the floor. Then dragging. It sounded like something, or someone, being pulled across the floor. I got up, walked to my ceiling, and just stood there, listening. The sounds continued for a while, then stopped suddenly. Complete silence. My heart was beating fast, but I told myself it was probably nothing. Maybe the old woman dropped something and was moving furniture. The next morning, I saw her at the gate when I went to throw the trash. I asked her politely, "Ma'am, is everything okay upstairs? I heard some loud noises last night." She just looked at me, almost confused, and said, "I didn't get out of bed. I haven't for 2 days. My knees hurt too much." I smiled, awkwardly, and didn't say more. But inside I was uneasy. If she didn't move, then who was walking and dragging things around up there? That night I stayed up. I turned off all lights and just waited in the dark with my ears open. Right around 2:10 a.m. it began. Footsteps, but this time, they didn't stay upstairs. I heard something on the stairs. Slow, deliberate steps coming down. I froze. The stairs were just on the other side of my door. I crept toward the door and peeked through the peephole. No one was there. But the steps continued. And then, they stopped. Right in front of my door. I swear to you, I felt a presence on the other side. Like someone was standing there, staring at the door. Not knocking. Not speaking. Just being there. I backed away slowly, not making a sound. After about 10 minutes, the feeling went away. I looked again through the peephole. Nothing. The next day, I called the landlord and asked if anyone else had moved into the building recently. He said no, just me and the old lady, no one else. Things got worse from there. Every night the sounds grew louder, footsteps, dragging, and sometimes whispering. Yes, I heard whispers, not clear words, just sounds, like someone trying to speak but couldn't. One night I couldn't take it anymore. I went upstairs to check for myself. It was about 3 a.m. I tiptoed to the upper floor, phone in hand, flashlight on. Mrs. D'Souza's door was shut tight, but the apartment next to hers, the one that was supposed to be empty, was slightly open. I pushed the door gently. It creaked as it opened. I called out, "Hello? Is someone in here?" No answer. The room was cold, much colder than it should have been. I stepped inside. The walls had old, peeling wallpaper, dust everywhere. It smelled like something had been left to rot. I walked into the living room. That's when I saw it, chair in the middle of the room, and on it, a rope. Like someone had been tied there. There were scratch marks on the floor, deep ones, like someone tried to escape. Suddenly my flashlight flickered and went out. Total darkness. And then I heard breathing right next to me. Not my breathing, I was holding mine. This was deeper, slower, almost like growling. I ran. I didn't look back. I sprinted down to my flat and locked the door. I didn't sleep that night, or the next. I called the landlord again, panicked. I begged him to tell me the truth. And finally, he did. He said no one had lived in that top apartment for 3 years. The last tenant was a man who had gone missing during the first week of lockdown. Police searched the place but never found a body. People said he had lost his mind staying alone, tied himself to a chair, and then somehow vanished. Others said he was dragged away. But the strange part was, every new tenant who stayed in the building during lockdown either moved out quickly or simply disappeared. I moved out the very next day. I packed whatever I could carry and left before the sun even rose. I didn't even care about my deposit. Now, whenever I hear stories about people going missing during lockdown, I think of that place, that cold apartment, the breathing in the dark. And sometimes when I wake up at 2 a.m., I feel like something is standing outside my door again, waiting. I know it sounds crazy, but I lived it, and I'll never forget it. So, if you ever move into a place that feels too quiet, too cheap, or just off, listen to your gut. Some doors once opened don't shut properly ever again. This is the story of something that happened to my friend Daniel during the first lockdown. I'm going to tell you everything exactly how he told me, and trust me, once you hear it, you'll start looking at your own walls a little differently. Back in April 2020, Daniel had just moved into a small one-bedroom flat in East London. He had broken up with his girlfriend right before lockdown started and wanted to be alone for a while. His new flat was part of an old Victorian house that had been split into smaller units. It had creaky floors, high ceilings, and old wooden doors. He liked it, said it had character. That's what he thought in the beginning. The first 2 weeks were normal. He worked from home, played games, cooked fancy meals he never had time for before. But soon, he started hearing things. It began with small knocks on the wall behind his bed. Just a soft tapping sound, always at night, always at the same time. 3:17 a.m. Not loud enough to wake him, but enough to be noticed if he was already awake. He thought maybe it was the pipes, or maybe someone else in the house was moving around. But after the 5th night, it started getting weirder. One night, the knocks turned into scratching, like someone, or something, was running fingernails along the inside of the wall, slow and steady. Daniel sat up in bed, completely still. Chai-tea. Noise continued for 10, maybe 15 minutes. Then silence. The next morning, he tried to find out what was on the other side of that wall, but when he checked, he was confused. There shouldn't have been anything behind it. That part of the house used to be a fireplace, long sealed up when the place was renovated. It was just bricks and plaster back there. Nothing more. The next night, it got worse. At 3:17 exactly, he heard the scratching again, but this time, it was followed by whispering. He couldn't make out the words, but it was clear. A soft voice, mumbling from inside the wall. He pressed his ear to it. It stopped. Then something tapped back. 3 knocks, like it knew he was listening. Daniel panicked. He jumped back from the wall and turned on every light in his flat. He stayed awake until morning, drinking coffee and pacing the room. The next day, he tried to convince himself he was just stressed, hearing things. It was lockdown after all. Everyone was going a little mad. But the truth was, the wall wasn't just a wall. He told me he eventually decided to record it, just to prove to himself he wasn't losing it. So, he set up his phone on a chair, pressed record, and aimed it right at the wall. He went to bed, heart pounding, unable to sleep. The next morning, he played the video. At first, it was just silence. But at 3:17, the noise began. Scratching, whispers, and then something else, a voice, clear and slow, a woman's voice. Daniel, are you awake? His hand started shaking. He rewound the video, played it again. Same voice, soft, almost kind, but wrong. Like it came from a mouth that hadn't spoken in years. Daniel, let me out. He stopped the video, called me immediately. I remember the sound of his voice. He was terrified. I thought he was joking at first, trying to scare me, but he swore on everything he had. He said, "Mate, I don't know what's in the wall, but something's in there, and it knows my name." The landlord refused to come and check. He just told Daniel the place had been empty for years before he moved in, and no one had ever complained. Said the walls were solid and there was no crawl space or pipes in that section. Daniel didn't sleep that night. He sat on the couch with a kitchen knife in one hand and his phone in the other. Around 3:15, the flat grew cold. He said it felt like all the warmth had been sucked out of the air. The lights flickered. Then the scratching started again. This time, it didn't stop. It moved. From the wall behind his bed, to the ceiling, to the wall near the window. It was like something was crawling inside the walls, circling him. And then it spoke again. "Daniel, I can see you." He ran out, barefoot, in the freezing night air, called me from outside. His voice was shaking. He stayed at my place for a few days after that, but he kept having nightmares. He said the voice was now in his dreams, always saying the same thing. "Let me out." I finally convinced him to call in someone to break open that part of the wall. Not a builder, just a friend of ours who had tools and wasn't scared easily. He agreed to help, mostly because he thought Daniel had gone crazy and wanted to prove him wrong. They started tearing through the plaster during the day, bit by bit. And then they found it. A space. A small hidden space no bigger than a closet. And inside it were old remains. Bones. Human bones. Wrapped in a torn, rotting nightgown. A wedding ring still on one bony finger. And on the wall, scratched into the brick, were words. So many, they almost overlapped each other. "I'm still here. Let me out. Daniel." Yes, his name. Carved into the brick. But that didn't make sense. That body had to be decades old. Long before he was even born. So how? The police came, took over the place. Daniel had to give a statement. The story even made the local news. Remains found during lockdown renovation. But they left out the part about the name, and the voice, and the whispers. He never went back, moved to another city, changed his number. I haven't seen him in over a year now. But sometimes, very late at night, I think about what happened to him, and I wonder, what if that space wasn't just sealed by accident? What if it wasn't just some forgotten corner of a house? What if it was a prison? And what if Daniel, just by living there, started to open it? So, if you ever hear tapping behind your walls, don't tap back. Whatever's in there might just be waiting. This is the story of what happened to my friend Mark during the lockdown. I'll tell it to you exactly how he told me, but be warned, it's not the kind of thing you forget easily. It all started in March 2020. Mark had been living in a small flat on the outskirts of Birmingham for a few months. He was a bit of a loner, didn't go out much, didn't like crowds. So when the lockdown hit, he didn't mind it too much. He worked from home, binge-watched shows, and spent his evenings reading or listening to music. It was peaceful at first. But that's the thing about peace, isn't it? It can turn strange when you're stuck in the same place for too long. That's exactly what happened to Mark. It began one night, about 2 weeks into the lockdown. Mark was in his flat, sitting in the living room, scrolling through his phone, when he heard something. It was faint at first, like a rustling sound, coming from the kitchen. Mark thought maybe it was just the wind or the old pipes making noise. But then, it stopped. A few minutes later, he heard it again. This time, louder, like something was being moved in the kitchen. Mark frowned. He knew he had left the kitchen light off, so he thought it was strange that anything could be making a noise in there. He stood up, walked over, and turned on the light. Nothing. The kitchen was empty, just the usual mess of dirty dishes. He checked the cupboards and fridge. Nothing out of the ordinary. But the strange feeling stuck with him. He couldn't shake it. That night, he couldn't sleep. He kept hearing little noises, faint scraping sounds, like something was moving around. In the walls, it was almost like there was something in the house with him, but no matter how hard he tried to ignore it, the feeling didn't go away. The next few nights, the noises got worse. They weren't just scraping sounds anymore. It was like someone was walking around. He could hear footsteps in the hallway, faint but distinct. Every time he tried to investigate, though, there was never anyone there. He started to get paranoid. Was someone sneaking into his flat at night, or was he just losing his mind? By the end of the week, he was exhausted. The noises had become regular, happening every night at the same time, around 2:30 a.m. He tried to sleep through them, but it wasn't easy. And one night the noises became more than just footsteps. It started with a soft knock at his bedroom door. Mark. He froze. That voice. It was low, almost a whisper. It sounded like someone he knew, but it couldn't have been. There was no one there. Mark. The door handle rattled slightly. Mark's heart raced. He didn't know what to do. He wanted to scream, but his voice felt stuck in his throat. He grabbed his phone and texted his friend Claire, who lived just a few blocks away. "Are you awake? Something's wrong. I'm hearing things." He didn't get a reply. Then there was a sudden thud. A loud noise from the hallway, like something heavy had fallen. Mark jumped out of bed, grabbing a flashlight from the drawer. He crept into the hallway, shining the light around. The flat was empty. Everything was in place. No fallen objects. No sign of anyone. But the air felt colder, like something had changed. Just as he was about to turn back to his room, he heard it again. This time, it was clearer. "Mark!" The voice was right behind him. He spun around. Nothing. There was no one there, but he could feel something. It was like the walls were closing in, like the flat itself was alive, watching him. He didn't sleep that night. He stayed up until morning, sitting in the living room with the lights on, the door locked, his eyes fixed on every shadow. When the sun came up, he breathed a sigh of relief, but it didn't last long. The next night, it happened again. And the next. The voice, the footsteps, the knocking at the door. It was like the flat was haunted, or worse, like something or someone was trying to get in. The worst part? It always happened at 2:30 a.m. Mark didn't know who to turn to. He couldn't call the police. They'd think he was crazy. He didn't want to tell anyone what was happening because he didn't want them to think he was losing it. But as the days passed, the strange events only became more intense. One night, he couldn't take it anymore. He called Claire and asked her to come over. He needed someone there with him, someone to tell him he wasn't imagining things. She agreed, but only after a lot of convincing. Claire didn't believe in ghosts or hauntings, so she thought it was just stress or lack of sleep. But Mark was desperate. When Claire arrived, Mark was waiting by the door looking like a mess. His hair was disheveled, and his eyes were bloodshot from lack of sleep. He didn't explain much to her at first, just told her to stay close. They sat together in the living room, talking about anything and everything to try and distract themselves. But as midnight approached, Mark started to feel that familiar sense of dread. The air became heavy, cold, and then, just like before, the sound of footsteps started up again. Mark tensed. Claire noticed his reaction and raised an eyebrow. "It's just your mind playing tricks on you," she said, trying to calm him down. But even she looked uneasy. Then, the knock came. A single loud knock at the bedroom door. "Mark!" This time, Claire heard it too. Her eyes widened, and she looked at Mark with a mixture of confusion and fear. "What the hell was that?" she whispered. "I told you," Mark replied, his voice shaking. "It's been happening every night." The knock came again, louder, this time. Mark and Claire exchanged a terrified glance. Claire stood up and grabbed the flashlight, motioning for Mark to follow her. They both walked to the door slowly, too afraid to move quickly. "Mark," the voice whispered again. "Let me in." With a shaking hand, Mark reached for the door handle and turned it. But when the door opened, there was nothing there. Just empty darkness. The silence stretched for what felt like hours. Neither of them moved. And then, as if it had all been a dream, the sound stopped. The house was quiet again. The air felt normal, warm, and still. They stood in the hallway for a long time, unsure of what to do. But when they finally went back into the living room, they found something odd. Sitting on the couch in the exact spot where Mark had been earlier was a small note. Written in a childish scrawl, it simply read, "I'm sorry, Mark. I had to. Make sure you stayed. Now you're mine." Mark turned pale. His hands shook as he showed Claire the note. Neither of them knew what to do next. The next morning, Mark packed up and left the flat. He didn't go back. No one has heard from him since. To this day, no one knows who or what was knocking on Mark's door at 2:30 a.m. every night. But I'll tell you this, whenever I hear a knock in the dead of night, I wonder, what if something was trying to get in? This is the story of what happened to my old friend Tom during the first lockdown. If you think things couldn't get strange during a pandemic, just wait until you hear what happened to him. Trust me, you won't forget it easily. Tom had always been a bit of an introvert. When the lockdown hit, he took it in stride. His job was mostly remote anyway, so working from home didn't bother him. He spent his days in his flat in Sheffield, binge-watching shows, playing games, and chatting with his family on Zoom. It was a peaceful life, at least for the first few weeks. But something started to feel off as time went by. It started small. At first, he just noticed a few odd things in his flat, things out of place. A mug on the table that he swore he had put in the sink. His shoes moved a few inches from where he left them. Little things that he tried to brush off, assuming it was his own forgetfulness, but the oddities started to grow. One night he was in the kitchen, making a late snack when he heard a soft thud coming from his bedroom. He stood still, straining his ears. It came again, a little louder. His heart skipped a beat. He walked down the hallway cautiously and opened the door to his bedroom. Everything was normal. Nothing had moved. But as soon as he stepped in, the air felt colder. It wasn't freezing, but there was definitely a chill in the room, and it sent a shiver down his spine. He shrugged it off and went to bed. But that night, he had a strange dream. In the dream, he was in his flat, walking around like it was just any other day. But when he looked in the mirror, he didn't see himself. Instead, he saw a pale figure standing right behind him, a figure that wasn't his reflection. The figure was tall, with dark eyes, and a wide smile that stretched far, too far across its face. Tom tried to scream, but no sound came out. He reached for the door, but it wouldn't open. The figure in the mirror just kept smiling, and then it started to move. Tom woke up in a cold sweat, his heart racing. He glanced around the room, and everything seemed normal. The room was warm, the sunlight streaming in through the window, but his mind was racing. The dream felt so real. It was like the figure had been standing there, waiting for him to wake up. He quickly shook it off, telling himself it was just a nightmare caused by the stress of being stuck at home for so long. However, the oddities didn't stop. The noises continued at night. Faint scratching sounds coming from the walls. Footsteps that seemed to follow him from room to room, even though he was alone. It was like there was someone else in the flat with him. Someone that only existed when the lights were off and the house was quiet. And then one evening, it got worse. Tom had been sitting in the living room scrolling through his phone when he heard a voice. It was quiet at first, barely above a whisper, but it was enough to make him freeze. Tom. He looked up, thinking maybe it was his phone or a sound from outside, but the voice came again, clearer this time. Tom. It was coming from the kitchen. He swallowed hard and stood up slowly, walking towards the doorframe. He peered around the corner, but the kitchen was empty. Nothing seemed out of place. He told himself it was just his imagination. He had been spending too much time alone. But that night, it happened again. The voice, the footsteps, the feeling of something lurking just out of sight. Tom couldn't ignore it anymore. He felt like he was being watched. He started checking the locks on his doors multiple times a day, convinced that someone was sneaking into his flat. But there was never anyone there. The worst part? Every time the clock struck 3 a.m., the voices would start. At first it was a soft whisper, but soon it became louder, more insistent. Tom, let me in. Tom, I know you're awake. Tom was terrified. He didn't know who to talk to. His family thought he was just being paranoid. His friends thought he was overreacting. But deep down, he knew something was wrong. He could feel it. Something was here. Something that didn't belong. One evening, he decided to take action. He grabbed a flashlight and a baseball bat, and he made his way to the attic. He had never been up there before, never had a reason to. But if something was going on, he needed to figure it out. The stairs creaked beneath his feet as he climbed into the attic. The space was small, filled with old boxes and forgotten furniture. Dust hung in the air like a thick fog, and the beam of his flashlight barely cut through it. Tom scanned the attic carefully. He wasn't sure what he was expecting to find, but he had to check. That's when he saw it. At the far end of the attic, there was a small door, one that he had never noticed before. It was hidden behind a pile of old boxes, as if someone had deliberately tried to keep it out of sight. His heart pounded in his chest as he walked towards it, flashlight in hand. The door was old, weathered with peeling paint and a rusty handle. It didn't seem to fit with the rest of the attic, as if it didn't belong there at all. Tom hesitated for a moment, unsure of whether he should open it. But the curiosity inside him won. He grabbed the handle and twisted. The door creaked open, and Tom shone his flashlight inside. The small room was pitch black, but there was something in the air, something thick and heavy. Tom stepped inside, his flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. And then he saw it. On the floor, scattered around the room, were dozens of old photos. They were yellowed with age, the edges curled and torn. He picked one up and his heart dropped. It was a picture of him. Well, it looked like him, but the person in the photo was different. The eyes were dark and hollow, and the smile stretched unnaturally wide across the face. The same figure he had seen in his dream. Tom's breath caught in his throat. He dropped the photo and stumbled backwards, his mind racing. He turned to leave the room, but the door slammed shut behind him with a deafening bang. Suddenly, the air around him grew cold again, the chill settling deep into his bones. The voice whispered, clearer than ever before, "Tom." The figure stepped out of the shadows, grinning from ear to ear, its eyes dark and empty, just like in the photo. Tom screamed, and then everything went black. The next morning, Tom's landlord found the flat abandoned, the door left wide open. No one had seen or heard from Tom since that night. Some say he was driven mad by the isolation of the lockdown. Others believe he was taken by whatever it was that haunted his flat. All I know for sure is that the flat has been empty ever since. No one has dared to live there again. Every now and then I get a text from Tom, but it's never him. The number is the same, but the messages are strange. Always the same one word. Tom. And I can't help but wonder, is he still out there? Or has whatever it was that found him in the attic found someone else?